There, it did it. Okay, I've got papers for everybody. Good job. Looks like everybody understands completely how to do this. Let me glance at these as I get them back, just to know if I have anything. I want to say, so Liam, I mentioned about their titles last week, but you didn't know, but I wrote it again. Andrew, here you go. Oh, yes. If I write something on your paper and you don't understand why, please ask me. Please say, I don't know why you put a comma there. I don't know why this comma is wrong. Oh, excellent. Oh, Caden. There you go, sir. Okay, what about simile? Okay, so do you mind if I out your simile to the world? Okay. Hey, Luke, is that you? Hey, can we grab Luke a chair? Or you want to just, there you go. Here's your paper. Take a look at it and see if there's anything you have a question on. But let me talk about similes for a minute. Now, some of the this doesn't apply to all of you. So Liam doesn't mind if I read his simile. Poetry was something that the Greeks did publicly, not privately in their rooms like modern day people do. Okay, so think what he's comparing. He's comparing people in Greece reading or writing poetry versus people today reading or writing poetry. It's basically the same thing. The only thing that's different is the time, right? So when we do a simile, we want things that are only alike in one way. So let's take Liam's and let's improve it. So they did poetry was something public. And for us, it's something private. Let's see if we can make a good one out of that poetry. It's something public. Something else that's public. What's something that's very obvious? Something that everyone can see. Thinking of nature. I'm thinking of the sun. So poetry was something that the Greeks did publicly, as plain to see as the sun in the sky. The sun is not like poetry or reading poetry or writing poetry in any way, shape, or form. Would we all agree on that? And you know what? It never occurred to me until this moment to compare the sun to Greeks reciting poetry. It's so different, but it's alike in one way. Everyone can see it. Does that make sense? So shoot for something, and some of you have got it, but you're not the only one, Liam, which is why I said I wanted to talk about it, and also in other classes, that has the idea that a simile is people today, like somebody, was it last time? School in Greece we studied the same subjects, and it was like school today. But you're comparing two schools, which are the same thing. But if we compare two things that are just not alike in any way except for one way, that makes an awesome simile. All right. If you are one of the people that I tend to mark, sometimes I X out a comma. You don't need a comma here. Or sometimes I add a comma. And you may think that it's just I have ESP or psychic comma powers or something, and I just know when to put a comma in. It's where you take a pause often. So you wouldn't, the sun, often the sun again, was shining in the sky. Sometimes I get things like this. I don't pause there. There's no reason for me to stop there. But if you think about it, the sun, which was about to be eclipsed, shone brightly. I put commas around this which clause for two reasons. First of all, it makes it easier to understand the sun which was, and then I have a verb, and then I have another verb, and I get confused. Also, the sun, which was about to be eclipsed, shone brightly. Even when I would say that out loud, I might have I accentuated it a little bit. I might have the slightest pause there just to make people understand what I'm saying. So whenever you're writing and you feel like there's a place where you would naturally take a pause, this is why reading your proofreading out loud is so great. If you read it out loud, you don't have to read it to anybody. You can read it alone in your room, like we do with poetry. That's fine. But when you read it out loud, you will suddenly realize, why did I put a comma there? I don't stop. This whole idea flows. I don't need a comma. Or conversely, you might pause and say, oh, this is kind of hard to understand unless I pause there and catch my breath. So that's there are comma rules, but I think the best comma rule of all is this easily understood if I take a pause? Okay, any other questions? Any questions at all about your papers? All right, awesome. Let's get your reading questions. I love today. So I brought, because you're staring at these, you will stare at these, and then you can enjoy them through the class. These are just obviously pots, not the 3-year-old baby pot. Greek pottery, which I think I'm going to bring in some pictures later. They had two different styles. Sometimes they liked a red background with black figures, or they did a black background with red figures. This is a little more red than they normally were. It was but a little more red than this orange. And so this is, obviously these are modern. These are not ancient vases. And the picture on this, though, is interesting. Apparently, this was a thing to put this. It's Ajax and Odysseus playing a dice game. That is the title of this. And they find vases and pots with this, and we don't know anything about this supposed dice game. It doesn't appear in the Iliad or any of the stories. It's just some point during the Trojan War, Ajax and Odysseus playing a dice game to pass time. And my son was taking a college class, and they were talking about this. And then he went to a consignment shop, and he found this right after they talked about it. It's like, it's Ajax and Odysseus playing a dice game. So we will have this as our visual aid. This I actually got when I was in Greece, just as a souvenir. And it's got Aphrodite, and it has Aphrodite's name in Greek letters. And since we are reading about the Trojan War, and she caused a lot of trouble. I mean, Paris caused trouble. But I don't know who's more at fault. We could write a paper on that. Is it Aphrodite's fault, or is it Paris's fault? She gave him the girl, but he actually went and stole her. I don't know whose fault it is, but we will have those as our visual aids. There's enough blame to go around. We have blame for everybody. All right. Last week, we started round 2 of the Persian Wars, right? 10 years ago in 490 BC, the Persians came and they unloaded their boats at Marathon, and they got squashed amazingly by 11,000 Greeks, and they ran home. And then Darius died, and all of this happened. But Xerxes, his son, said, I'm going back. I'm going to teach those guys a lesson. And as he came south through Greece, like we read last week, they got caught in the pass, the narrow pass at Thermopylae. And there were 300 Spartan warriors, along with several thousand other guys filling the pass, all of whom skedaddled as soon as they knew they were surrounded, except for the 300 Spartans. I forgot to tell you the famous quote at Thermopylae last week. One of the Persians, they say, was outside the pass, and he was taunting them, because they were fixing their hair, and doing. And he said, we're going to shoot so many arrows at you, the sky's going to be dark. There's going to be so many arrows coming at you. And Spartans were known, the area of Greece where Sparta is called Laconia. All right. And Spartans were trained not only to eat black broth and live very simply, but to speak simply. Don't say more than you need to. And this kind of spare, to the point talking, they call laconic. We still use this word. This is an English word. We use it today. If someone is a laconic speaker, they don't say much, but they speak to the point, right? So this Persian said, the arrows are going to darken the sky. And the Spartan guy said, great, then we can fight in the shade. That was it. He was not fazed. Great, give us shade. It's a bummer to fight in the sun. So it looked, at the end of last week, it looked like the Persians were really doing well. They have nothing standing between them and Athens, right? And back in Athens, there was a guy named Themistocles. I gave you a heads up on him last week. Smart guy, not necessarily an honest guy, but a smart guy nevertheless. And the first question I asked you is, what measure did Themistocles urge the Athenians to take? What did he say we need to do, Liam? We need boats. They are coming, and we need boats. Themistocles, we have a biography of Themistocles. And I just wanted to note a couple of things that his biographer tells us. It says, when he was a boy, the holidays and intervals in his studies, he did not spend in play or idleness as other children, but would always be inventing or arranging some oration or speech to himself, so that his master would often say to him, you, my boy, will be nothing small, but great one way or other, for good or else for bad. This struck me because I wondered how often I spend my holidays and intervals in play or idleness. And he did not. Hint, hint, since you're about to have a fall break, will you spend it in play or idleness? I don't expect you to invent orations for yourself, honestly. But he spent all his time training for the future. We find out that when he was a boy and the Battle of Marathon was fought and the general Miltiades got famous, he just brooded on it because somebody else was famous. Someone else was getting glory. Like, what if he steals all the glory there is to be had? He passed the nights without sleep and avoided all his usual places of recreation. And to those who wondered at the change and inquired the reason of it, he gave the answer that the trophy of Miltiades would not let him sleep. I don't know if we should be that obsessed with fame and glory, but he was. He was. So they had a prophecy. I'm going to go up a few pages and read part of it. They sent to the oracle at Delphi to find out what they should do. Walls of Zeus, wide gazing, permits to keep in honor of Pallas walls of wood, unshaken to shelter thee and thy children. Wait not for horse nor for foot that come to ruin for thy country, out of the mainland afar, but rather yield to the foeman, turning thy back in flight. For yet shalt thou meet him in battle. O divine Salamis, how many children of women shalt thou slay at the sowing of corn or the ripening of harvest? Well, they got this message back, and some people said, look, I think Athens used to have wooden walls. We used to have wooden walls up on the Acropolis. They talked about the Acropolis. Do you guys all know? We're going to look at pictures later. But in Athens and many Greek cities, they had a hill, pretty steep, with a flat top. All right, and that was the Acropolis. Yes, like a mesa, only not as big an extent. And so they would build temples up here in public buildings. And they said, there used to be wooden walls, all around this. I think we're supposed to go up on the Acropolis and hole up. Themistocles said, no. I am sure it means ships. I am sure it means ships. And people were freaking out. They said, there's going to be a terrible slaughter at Salamis, because how many children of men you will slaughter, O Salamis? And he said, no. Look, it said, O divine Salamis. If it was going to be bad for us, it would say, oh, wicked Salamis, oh, evil Salamis. But it said, oh, divine. It means it's good for us. Something good's going to happen there for us. Calm down. So Themistocles was very, very persuasive, and he got his way. And they channeled the money that would otherwise have gone into the treasury or be distributed to the people. They said, okay, you can spend it, build boats, build boats. Remember, they had 10 years in between the two attacks. But at this point, the Persians are heading there. And they've got to make a decision. Are we going to trust Themistocles and the boats, or are we not? Well, there were two guys in Athens who were party rivals, rivals for power, okay? One was Themistocles, and he was doing the boat thing, right? We got to build boats. And another was a guy named Aristides. And Aristides was actually a childhood friend of Themistocles. They grew up together, but they never quite got along because Themistocles would do anything it took to win, right? And Aristides wouldn't. I will not break the rules. If I lose, I lose, but I will obey the rules. Themistocles is like, no, do whatever you got to do. They didn't get along. There's also a rumor that they fought over a girl, which may or may not be true. At any rate, they were grown-ups now, and Aristides is like, I don't know about this boat thing. Themistocles is shady. I would not put it past him that maybe he's going to use some of that money for his own pockets. Well, every year in Athens, you could hold a special vote. And this vote was called an ostracism. All the people of the city, all the citizens, people who could vote. So not the women, not the children, not the foreigners living in Athens, but Athenian citizens. They would take a broken piece of pottery. You know, pottery, if you whack it, it will break, but pottery is really solid, and it will not break into dust. It will break into chunks. If you've ever broken a plate at home, you know this, that there's some little tiny bits, but there's generally chunks. And so they would take, because they used pottery, I mean, think of how many dishes we use. And if you're like me, think of how many dishes you break. I'm notorious in my house for breaking dishes. So they had lots of these bits, pottery bits, and they would take them and they would scratch or inscribe the name of someone they thought was getting too powerful in Athens. And they would all, on a given day, they would scratch it on a potsherd, they call these, and throw it into an urn. And they would count them. And whoever, you had to get a minimum number of votes for one person, but the person who got the most votes was ostracized. They had to leave Athens for 10 years. You didn't get fined, you didn't lose your stuff, you could take anything you wanted with you, and they wouldn't, like your house and all your belongings would be safe. Potsherds, the reason they call it this weird name, ostracos. A piece of a pot is called an ostracos. So they took the ostraca and they wrote names on them and put them in a jar, and they ostracized someone. We still use this word. We don't officially ostracize people from our country, but if ever you have a group of friends and then one of the friends does something mean, or you don't want to be friends with that person anymore. I hope this has not happened to you or doesn't, but you might not want to hang out with them anymore, and we would say you ostracize them from the group. Like, you're not really part of our group anymore. But this was an official political thing. And so they held an ostracism, and they wanted to get rid of Themistocles or Aristides, one or the other, because they needed to choose a direction to go, right? Because the Persians are going to come. The story is that Aristides was so honest that he was walking through the streets that day, and there was a man who could not write. He did not know how to write, but he wanted to vote. And he stopped Aristides, whom he did not know. And he said, will you help me? I want to vote. And Aristides said, sure. What name do you want me to write down? Aristides. And Aristides said, well, why? What has he ever done to you? He said, nothing. I just get so tired of hearing him called Aristides the Just, which was his nickname. They say Aristides was so honest he went ahead and wrote his own name down. And when they counted the votes, Aristides was out. When I was in Greece, I was inordinately excited in the museum, and all the people were looking at me strangely, because they had an exhibit of ostraca. with names. This is pictures from a museum case in the Agora in Athens. This one says Aristides. Are you kidding me? See, I'm excited all over again, and I'm not even there. This one down here says Themistocles. It is amazing. We still have them. They're practically indestructible, these pieces of pottery. So, so they voted out Aristides, and Themistocles had the field. Well, there's a few hardcore guys, and they said, I don't know about these boats. I still think it's the wooden wall we used to have on the Acropolis. We're just going up there. Aristides says, fine. Have fun with that. We're all going on the boats. And so this is when I need my map, which I usually put on the ground, but I can't because of my tripod. So here's Athens. Everybody kind of see that? Do you see, and it looks like Athens is right on the coast. Can you, is my bottle in the way? Oh, is it glare? Okay, yummy. Okay, is that better? It might glare for someone else, but Athens is about, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 miles from the coast. But so they all went down to the coast. And do you see this island that looks like a crescent roll? Can you kind of see it looks like a crescent roll? This is Salamis. Oh, divine Salamis. This is the island of Salamis. So Themistocles had all the people of Athens take their families, take their grandpas and grandmas, the women, the children, and they took them over to the island of Salamis. Very quick sail to get them out of the way, to get them safe. And they anchored the fleet right in this bay. I'm sorry, I wish I had a closer up map of this. There's a bay right here between the island and the mainland. And they stationed their fleet. Okay, so the Persians come. They walk into Athens. Everybody's gone. I mean, except for the people who hold up on the Acropolis, whom they kill. And they burn it to the ground. They burn the temples. And Xerxes says, take that for burning down my temples in Sardis. However many 20 years ago, whatever it was. Take that. I will burn your temples down now. And the Athenians just waited. Well, the Athenians have a problem, and they have the same exact problem that they had at Marathon and Thermopylae. Not enough people want to stick by them. And everybody who lives in the Peloponnese is worried about home. I live in Pylos, say. I'm all the way over here. And I have sent a fleet to help Athens. Athens had the biggest fleet. I think they had 200 ships of the 350 or something like that were there. But I'm worried because if we lose here, the land army is going to march through here. The Persian fleet's going to come around. They're going to kill my family. So one by one, the cities said, we're going to lose. I think I should just sail home and be with my family. I think I should leave and be with my family. Themistocles heard the rumors. And he said, if they leave, we're all dead. Right? We got to stick together. If they leave, we're all dead because we won't be able to fight them off. I've just been ignoring my questions. I'm so sorry. I did it again. So we already did what was ostracism. Themistocles did a shady, underhanded thing, but it worked. He got a slave guy to come. He said, look, I want you to send a message. I want you to creep through to the Persian king, and I want you to give him a message. And it's this. This is a message from Themistocles. He really, really is rooting for the king of Persia, actually, secretly. I'm fighting with the Greeks, but I really hope the king of Persia wins. And here's why I'm sending you this message. I just want you to know that some of the other Greek cities want to sail away. They want to pull out of the fleet. And if you want to catch everybody, you better come and attack fast. I advise you to surround us so they can't get away. This was only half true. Themistocles was so not on the king of Persia's side at all. But he did want them surrounded, because then no one could leave. He needed them not to leave. This isn't the first time he actually did something kind of sneaky. Last week, do you remember that there was they were fighting at Thermopylae, but at the same time there was a fleet, and some of the fleet sailed around and got caught in a storm? The Greek fleet also wanted to leave, and he just bribed them. He got money from Athens, and then he dispersed it. He just bribed the various captains. And they all thought it was just money from him. They didn't know it was from the government. And actually, and then he kept some for himself. This was Themistocles. And it worked. Well, when there were terrible problems back in Greece, sometimes they would recall people who had been ostracized to have them help. And they recalled Aristides. They said, Aristides, now you're pretty level-headed. We need your advice. And he sailed in. He sailed in just before the Persians surrounded him. And he went to Themistocles' ship and he said, I don't know if you know it, but you are now surrounded. Nobody's getting away. And Themistocles said, great. That is exactly what I wanted to happen. And would you go in and tell the generals, the captains? Because if it comes from me, they won't believe me. Because he has a history of stretching the truth. And but if you tell them, they will believe you, because everybody believes Aristides. He's Aristides the Just. So he told them, like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So they are surrounded by the Persian fleet. They have a secret weapon, though, and the Persians don't know it. The next morning, the king of Persia, Xerxes, they say, brought a throne along. I don't know if it's probably not the throne that he uses back at home, a portable version, a foldable throne. I don't know. And he puts it up on the cliffs overlooking the sea like he's going to go watch a movie. You know, with popcorn, you know, Skittles, whatever. He's going to just watch the battle in front of him. And he gets ready because it's going to be a great slaughter. We're just going to wipe out the Greeks. It's going to be so satisfying. And the battle starts. And Dorothy Mills gives you a very, very long excerpt from a play. After this happened, a famous Greek playwright named Aeschylus wrote a play called The Persians. And in this play, the messengers are going home to Persia to give them an update on how the war went, how the battle went. And were you able to follow it well enough to answer this question? What happened to the Persian fleet at Salamis? Did you catch it? Okay. Sometimes if somebody reads it to you, all right. So I'm going to read the part that I put in your reading guide, but I'm going to start a little bit farther up, okay? Okay. At first, the Persian navy's torrent flood withstood them. But when he says our, he's Persian. When our vast fleet was cramped in strait space, friend could lend no aid to friend, then ours, by fangs of allies' beaks of bronze, were struck and shattered all their ore array. While with shrewd strategy, the Hellene ships swept round and rammed us, and upturned were hulls of ships. No more could one discern the sea, clogged all with wrecks and limbs of slaughtered men. The shores, the rock reefs, were with corpses strewn. Do you understand what happened?
So they were around behind them and attacked.
Well, they were on all sides of them, but it will help if you know what strait space means. Strait means confined, narrow, small. Yes. Except with ships. So you've got this bay. All right, I'm totally not being geographically accurate, okay? So you've got this bay and the mainland here, and they're all here. And here's all the Greek ships. And here's the Persian ships, all right? but they're cramped in. They're so close. All right, they're really, really close. This kind of looks like an amoeba or something now, some sort of virus. The Greek ships are small and they can dart around. The Persian ships are big and heavy, and it takes them a mile to swing around. So listen, at first, the Persian Navy's torrent flood withstood them. At first, we withstood their attack. But when our vast fleet was cramped in straight space, friend could lend no aid to friend. Then ours, our what? Our ships were then ours by fangs of allies, beaks of bronze were struck. Where are the beaks of bronze? Front of the ship. So what's happening? Ours, they're ramming each other. They're ramming each other. What? Bumper cars, but not good, because then you rip a hole in the side and you sink. They just rammed each other because they didn't have room to turn. They were stuck in there and they had no way out. Ours, by fangs of allies' beaks of bronze, were struck and shattered all their ore array. While, with shrewd strategy, the Hellene ships swept round, rammed us, and upturned were hulls of ships. When the Persians got tangled with each other, the Greeks just went around and rammed them. There's a famous story, our friend Herodotus, merry-go-round of death fame, tells the story of this battle. And there was a female captain, Artemisia. She brought a whole fleet. And he's on his throne and he's watching, he's soda and popcorn, whatever, just watching the show. And that one's doing a good job. Who's that one? Oh, it's Artemisia, sire. Well, Artemisia actually was ramming one of the friendly ships at the time. But Xerxes couldn't tell who was friend and who was foe. It's like, oh, she's doing an awesome job. Actually, she was ramming her neighbor to get away from the person behind her. It was not a good job at all. She got highly praised for it later. She never told him the truth. And Herodotus says, luckily, everybody died on the ship she hit, so nobody could come back later and say, she just ran into us and sank us for no reason. It was a mess. It was a slaughter. It was a slaughter. So, many of them couldn't swim. But today, most people, probably at least more than half of people can swim. In the ancient world, swimming wasn't an art that everyone indulged in. And so a lot of these Persian sailors couldn't swim. But the ones who could, or just grabbed hold of broken pieces of floating ships, paddled their way into the nearby island of Salamis. Who's on Salamis? Who did they put on Salamis? All the rest of the Athenians, including guys who maybe were a little past their prime for fighting, but they can sure shoot an arrow at somebody, or they can whack somebody while they're crawling half dead out of the surf up onto the shore. They just whacked them all. It was a mess. It was a complete slaughter. Go back to the oracle here. O divine Salamis, how many children of women shalt thou slay at the sowing of corn or the ripening of harvest? This was one of the most incredible sea battles in the history of the world. I keep saying that about all these battles. Most incredible battle, because they were. One after another, the few Greeks fought the entire Persian army. How many days did it take them to get across that boat bridge? 7 days and 7 nights. That many people marching. And it's not even the people on the ships. And little Greece not only fought them off, but wiped the floor with them. And they will never come back after this. Well, that's not quite true. I will put an addendum to that. Xerxes saw the mess and he said, we need to go. I need to get my army out of here because I don't know what's up with these Greeks, but we're all going to die if we stay here. He was quite shaken. There was no thought of sailing around and attacking the cities on the Peloponnese. No, I just want to go home. But I can't fit all my guys on my ships, right? I've got to march my guys all the way around here and then, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, I hope that bridge is still there. Right? Plus, what's left of his fleet, not a lot left of his fleet, is going to sail back along with them to replenish for supplies. I need to get out of here. So Themistocles' first idea was, we need to go over there and break that bridge down. And we've got them trapped, and we will wipe them out. So he called Aristides to him. He said, Aristides, I got a great idea. Let's go over there to it. Aristides, he's a little more thoughtful, a little less rash. He says, well, here's the thing, Themistocles. Do we really want that whole army trapped here? It's like wild animals. You know, if they will run away from you if they can, but if you trap them in a room with you, they will attack. That's what they do. It's their only choice. Do we want to leave him no choice but attack? Maybe we would like him to leave as fast as possible. Themistocles said, I like the way you think, Aristides, but he's got to do something shifty. Here's what he does. He sends another message to the king. Oh, king, this is Themistocles again. You know, I'm the guy who kept the Greeks from running away. You know, it didn't work out the way we thought. Hint, hint, it did work out the way I thought, but it didn't work out the way we thought. But here's the thing. The rest of the Greeks want to sail over there and break that bridge. It's not true. But I told them, no, let's wait. Let's wait. And so, king, just remember, I did this for you. But it's served two purposes. First of all, we'll talk a little bit. I wonder if Dorothy Mills tells you the rest of the story. I can't remember. I don't want to ruin the rest of the story of Themistocles. If Themistocles doesn't pop up in the next few weeks, will you ask me what happened to Themistocles? Okay, and I'll let you find out on your own if she tells you. So he did one thing that I won't talk about yet, but the other thing is he warned Xerxes, somebody's thinking about breaking that bridge. You better hightail it. Double march. Get yourself to that bridge fast before it's down. And he did. Now, he had a general named Mardonius, and Mardonius said, look, I feel really bad. We have been floor mopped, you know, on more than one occasion, and I feel like they must be tiring out. I feel like the Greeks must be worn out. If you'll just let me stay behind with, you know, a select number of guys, I will deal with this next year. And Xerxes, well, okay, good luck with that. I'm leaving. So he leaves Mardonius behind, just up, not far from Thebes, near the little town of Plataea, that little town that sent 1,000 people to Marathon to help out. And Mardonius camps there over the winter. The Greeks, well, let me ask you, what happens to your confidence level when things go well? We got this. We have beaten them at Marathon. We have beaten them at Salamis. Yes, there was the Thermopylae thing, but that was traitors. And yes, Athens has been burned to the ground, but we can rebuild. In fact, at one point, one of the other cities taunted Themistocles. It's like, you're such a hotshot. You don't even have a city. Your city's gone. And he said, oh, yeah? My city is here. My city is the people. As long as I have the people, we can go back and rebuild the physical city. My city's right here on the ships. My city's right over there on the island of Salamis waiting to go home. But so their confidence level skyrockets. And they go out and they mop the floor with Mardonius the next year. And keep burying my questions. The last question I asked you was why the Greeks didn't treat Mardonius's body like the Persians had. And just before you answer, let me remind you, I'm not sure if she told the story, when Leonidas died at Thermopylae, the Persians did something that a lot of ancient people did, like Achilles did to Hector's body, okay? Abuse the body. So we like to cut off people's heads and stick them on poles. We like to do that. It's a deterrent. It would be a deterrent to me, I'll tell you what. If I went into a city and there were a bunch of heads on poles, I would really watch my step. I'd be very careful what I did. Yeah, I wouldn't go in. So they mistreated Leonidas's body, kind of hacked it up and stuck his head on a pole. And someone said to Pausanias, who was the Spartan general in charge at Plataea, well, it's your turn. Do it to him. Why did he not? Why, Liam?
He didn't want to treat them as a barbaric way like they did. He basically didn't want to be as bad as they were.
We're better than that. We're not that sort of people. Stranger, thou holdest me as naught by advising me to do such a thing. These things it is more fitting for barbarians to do than for Hellenes, and even with them we find fault for so doing. I do not desire any such manner as this to please those who like such things. As for Leonidas, he has been greatly avenged already by the unnumbered lives which have been taken of these men. As for thee, come not again to me with such a proposal, nor give me such advice, and be thankful, moreover, that thou hast no punishment for it now. We are better than that. Then the story tells us that Pausanias marched into Mardonius's camp, and it was awesome. He had the most expensive tents, like gold and silver dishes. Who takes gold and silver dishes with them on war campaigns? I don't know. But Persians did. Luxury. And Pausanias, Spartan, used to eating in the communal cafeteria, the black broth, no money, nothing expensive, looks at this and he said, somebody go make me a Spartan meal. Go make some black broth and all the stuff that we would normally eat at home at Sparta. And he laid out a Persian feast. And he laid out a Spartan meal. And he said, I want everybody to look at this. These people are so stupid that they left a place where they live like this to attack a group of people who lives like this. What in the world could they want from us? They had this, and they wanted this. Just because they wanted more, and they wanted revenge. I wish I could say that that is the end of the story of Pausanias, and I'm 99.7% sure that Dorothy Mills does not tell you this, but Pausanias went off on campaign. You know, the war wasn't technically over. There were still Persians stationed along the Ionian coast, threatening the Greek colonies here. And they sent Pausanias over this area to, I'm sorry, what? I know, but for some reason, this is called Ionia. I think this is the Ionian Sea because of the colonies in Italy. He took a liking to living like Persians. He started out well, but he hung out with all the Persian people, and he started wearing their clothes and eating their food, and he liked it. Pausanias eventually became a traitor to Greece, and he joined the Persians. I am sorry to say. And he met a bad end because of it. Because I guess luxury is very attractive. It's very alluring. You know, it sucks you in. It sucked Pausanias in. The Persians will never come back. They're done. And forever now, Greece will be a part of Europe. Greece will be involved in European affairs. It will not be sucked into the Persian Empire, which is important for us because Greek philosophers and Greek literature eventually found its way to Rome when Rome conquered them, which will be our second semester. And through Rome found its way to us, made what Europe is. We are not Persian, we are not Eastern, we are European. And it's these wars that settled that. Greece, however, is not under attack anymore. But what sometimes happens, I asked you earlier what happens when things go well and your confidence level plummets or soars. what happens sometimes to someone's pride level when things go well? It also goes up sometimes. You start thinking you're really hot stuff. Look what I did. Athens could really think she was hot stuff because she sent more ships than any of the other places. In fact, a later historian who's going to talk about the next war we're going to be reading about said if you said that Athens saved Greece, you wouldn't be far off from the truth. Athens probably saved Greece. Themistocles probably saved Greece. If the Allies had run away and Athens had gotten squished, Persians would have just squished everybody. Themistocles kept them there. But Athens is going to get, as they say, too big for her britches. Athens is going to say things like, well, you know, we spent a lot of our own money on those ships. I feel like the other states, city-states owe us. Athens is going to become an empire. And eventually they're going to do things that sound very much like the king of Persia would have done to people. My high schoolers are reading a book. I'll just read a quote out of this book. They're doing ancient Rome all year. And we're reading this history book. This was written 2,000 years ago. And for him, he calls it modern times because he's looking back 800 years before himself. And he says, well, why would I write a history book? He says this: the study of history is the best medicine for a sick mind. For in history, you have a record of the infinite variety of human experience, plainly set out for all to see. And in that record, you can find for yourself and your country both examples and warnings. Fine things to take as models, base things rotten through and through to avoid. That's his mission statement in writing this book. And I feel like it's a good lesson. What happens when things go well? Maybe you're not the ruler of a country. Is anybody here the ruler of a country? I don't think so. I am not. But we can still take warning. When things go well and you get all full of yourself, beware. Beware that you don't treat other people like maybe you were once treated. Treat people like the enemy used to treat you. That is not a very encouraging intro to the next chapter, is it? Honestly, that sounds a little daunting. But over our break, I would like you to read chapter 10 and find out how Athens went from basically place with no city at all because it's been destroyed to the capital of an empire. They didn't do it overnight, but you know, they did it within 40 years. That's not very long. All right, so that is assignment number 1. It is not extra, even though we have 2 weeks, it's still basically the same amount that you would normally read. So you really do get a break. So read chapter 10 for me for next week. Now, before we talk about the Trojan War at all, can we talk about your papers? I asked you this week to at least make an outline, 3 paragraphs on the Greeks and their neighbors, right? So basically it was choose 3 of those, Etruscans, the Lydians were the ones with not enough information. Etruscans, Phoenicians, Egyptians, Assyrians. Did everyone choose 3? Did everyone jot down at least 4 to 5 things that were interesting or important? Everybody has an outline. Awesome. But do you know how to make the outline? Okay, all right. So no questions about the outline. I want you to write that paper over break, okay? So you got 2 weeks to write the paper. I can't tell you not to just blow off the first week. Although, if you get to work on it right away, you see, and then you finish it in the next 4 or 5 days, then you have a whole week where you have no writing assignment. Something to consider. I want you to include a simile. I want you to include alliteration. And some of you, and When I say some of you, I don't even know if it's any of you in this room. It's some of all of my junior high students. Some people are not consistently giving me those things. So make sure you do them. And it helps me very much if you mark them. And we added the ing opener. Remember, the ing is a verb form ending in ing, but it has to describe what the subject is doing. So we have sitting on the couch. On the couch? What is wrong with me today?
How many ing openers do we have?
Just one, just one. Sitting on the couch, Liam asked a question. This is fine because we say, who is sitting? The subject of our sentence, Liam. Sitting on the couch. I did it again. Apparently, I think I have to do an in after a U. Sitting on the couch. The popcorn was delicious. No, I know that I'm trying to tell you that I was sitting on the couch eating popcorn, but this is no, because now the popcorn is sitting on the couch. And if you eat popcorn like me, after you're done, popcorn is sitting on the couch, but not intentionally. If we have time, I brought in a book. This is just the funniest book ever written. It is English grammar mistakes. This man had teachers from around the country send him things, or just people send him stuff out of church bulletins and various newspapers that are just ghastly. And there's a whole section on misplaced modifiers. So if we have some time, I might read. See, then I'll laugh, but you won't, because I just think they're hilarious and do this, and people look at me. You have a strange sense of humor, Mrs. Ferguson. It's like, no, but it's so funny. So try to do one of each of those in your paper, okay? That is assignment number 2 over your 2-week break. I have a high school class that when I say 2-week break, then they email me and say, how many weeks are we taking off? No, we're skipping 1 week. Everybody got it? I will see you 2 weeks from today instead of 1 week from today. All right. Yes. Sometimes when I say we're taking 2 weeks off, like, oh, are we, what does that mean? Seems obvious to me, but it's not obvious to them. All right, the Trojan War. By the way, the third thing you're going to do for me over break is you're going to finish the Trojan War book, which would be parts 5 and 6. Very good. So you're going to finish the war and find out what happened to all these Greek guys when they came home. Don't tell, in case it's a surprise for anyone. We read about Achilles, didn't we? We talked about this last week. This idea of being shot in the heel. We talked about that, didn't we? Was a later story, but I liked the way she put it in here. There's a bunch of versions of these stories. Because did you ever wonder how being shot in the heel could kill you?
Yeah.
Like, this is not a vital organ. You can live with a hole in your heel indefinitely. But do you remember what she said? Poisoned. That Apollo gave Paris one of, the super Apollo arrows that just kills people, that killed all of Niobe's children, and Apollo's arrows that give you plague. But well, I get the idea. This is my reenactment of the death of Achilles. So if he's running and then, it comes, and then it hits him from above into the heel. I suppose it wouldn't really matter where it hit you if the arrow is poisoned, except that in this version of the story, Achilles is invulnerable. He cannot be wounded or harmed anywhere but the heel. But that's a later, in the actual, in the Iliad, we don't even hear about Achilles' death. Does anybody find it not fair that Paris gets to be the one to take him out? Paris is kind of a jerk. This is all Paris's fault, and Paris has a history of just hanging out inside while people are fighting for him. I'm sad. But Paris got his, didn't he? Because when Paris was wounded, who did he turn to for help? Yeah. Really? Really? You ditched her so you could go steal someone's wife. And when you're dying, you go and say, "Oh, would you save my life?" No, will not save your life. You should have thought of that before you ran off and kidnapped other women. She changes her mind too late, which is tragic. Paris must have been very charming for her to even give in. Oh, I can't let him die. But let's talk about this bow, the bow of Heracles. We have this poor guy, Philoctetes. If you have ever seen the Disney Hercules, Philoctetes ends up being the satyr guy who trains him. But in the story, Philoctetes is a guy, and he got bit by a snake on the way to Troy, and it it wouldn't heal and it wouldn't kill him. It just festered and oozed and it smelled really bad. And apparently he just moaned and groaned all the time. So they just dumped him. I, I just have trouble getting over that. They just dumped him on an island on the way. Dude, we are tired of listening to you moan. Just stay there. We'll get you on the way back. Well, it was 10 years later, and they still hadn't come back. But he had been a friend of Heracles, a buddy. And Heracles had a famous bow and famous arrows. These were arrows. Do you remember the story? Nessus the centaur, poisoned arrows of Heracles. Philoctetes, at least they left him that so he could shoot food. I guess you can eat the food shot with the poisoned arrows and it doesn't poison you. Well, see, that's what I'm wondering. But we're just going to have to grant. Do you know how sometimes when you read a story, if you pick every plot point apart, it loses the fun? And sometimes you just have to roll with it. We're just going to roll with it. That Philoctetes could kill things with these arrows and eat, so he hasn't starved to death. It seems that there are a bunch of prophecies about taking Troy, doesn't it? We can't take Troy as long as we don't have the bow of Philoctetes. We need Achilles' son to come. And then we need this palladium, this statue from the temple. And they still don't win right away. I know. But they get this prophecy. I don't think they got all the prophecies all at once. I think they trickled out from their prophet. So he said, okay, we need that bow now. Odysseus says, okay, I'll do it. I'm going to take Pyrrhus with me. Pyrrhus is Achilles' son. This war has been going on so long that the little boy that that Achilles left at home is now a grown man. And it's his grandparents' wedding that started it all with the apple of discord. We're on the grandchild generation now. Pyrrhus is sometimes called Neoptolemus, and I'm not going to waste time looking things up in here. But Dorothy Mills, or Olivia Coolidge describes him as being me. You know what? I am going to look it up because I like the way she described it. That he was not a nice guy. But that's not very well said. Not a nice guy. Okay. You shall wear your father's armor against Heracles' grandson, said Odysseus. I give it to you freely, for you look as though you were made for it, as I never was. The young man smiled happily on Odysseus, charmed by his generous words, while the rowers glanced at one another in amusement because they had listened to Odysseus before. Odysseus has a history of buttering people up, as they say. Your young master is eager for battle, said one in a low voice to the nearest of Pyrrhus's servants. He could hardly say farewell to his mother, and he never looks back at the land that has been his home. He is proud and he is harsh, replied a servant. Nevertheless, he is already a warrior, such as we in Skyros have never seen. He is proud and he is harsh. Is this the kind of guy who's going to give mercy to someone on the battlefield? Probably. So amazingly, though, he gets drafted to go on this mission with Odysseus. We're going to go get that bow from Philoctetes. Here's Pyrrhus, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go up. I'm going to hide because he hates me. You're going to go up and pretend you're alone and say that you were irritated with the rest of the Greeks and you decided to leave. And then tell him you'll take him home and just offer to help him carry stuff. And as soon as you do, reach out and get the bow and arrows and then run to me as fast as you can. But Pyrrhus may be proud and he may be harsh, but he's not dishonest. This smells bad to him. Right? Really, do we have to lie to him? Yes, says Odysseus. Yes, we do. All right. But as you read, can he go through with it? He can't. He's got to tell him the truth. They finally get him to come because they assure him that he is a vital missing link in the chain of taking Troy. 10 years ago, you were just baggage. You were just moaning baggage. Now you're the missing link, what we need to take our city. Now we want you. Odysseus, over break, you're going to read the story of Odysseus coming home. I hate to color it too much, but this already did a little bit. The ancient world has mixed feelings about Odysseus. The Odyssey, the poem about him, calls him the man of twists and turns. Twists and turns. He tells the truth when it suits him. You know what? Kind of like Themistocles. Kind of like Themistocles. He does what has to be done to make what needs to happen happen. And if he has to lie a little bit, he doesn't mind. But he's the great hero of this poem about him, about his coming home. Well, yay, Odysseus, we want you to get home. But Greeks who read these stories later and added stories like this, I don't think Odysseus is such a great guy. To the point where the plays that were written after the Persians attacked Greece, he was sometimes the villain. Weirdly. 1,700 years later, after all these stories and plays where he was the villain, 1,700 years later, an Italian man wrote an enormous poem. It's called the Divine Comedy. And in the Divine Comedy, his main character, which is himself, goes through hell and purgatory and paradise on a journey. He meets Odysseus in hell. And hell in this poem is divided up into levels. So like different sins are being punished in different levels with different punishments. And the writer of this poem wasn't trying to pretend this is really what hell is like. This was a poem. This was a work of art. It was literature. Anyway, he found Odysseus in the level where they torture and punish false counselors. Counselors who lie to people, who mislead people. And Odysseus is there. However, when you read his story of his homecoming, enjoy it. He is the hero of that story. And he is fighting monsters in that story. Can you lie to monsters? Is it legit to lie to monsters? Ooh, that's a theological. Is it ever right to lie to any other creature? That would take us more than 25 minutes to. Like the Cyclops. You guys are probably familiar with the Cyclops.
I feel like you could lie to it, and it might actually believe that you can lie to it. But if it was something like a hydra, you couldn't lie to it
because it's like an animal. Yeah. You can't really lie to dogs. I mean, you could, but they wouldn't know. Well, the question, Liam, and we don't have time. You can mull this over your break. Does lying just trick someone else, or does it do something to you as you tell the lie? Does it change you? Are we not supposed to lie because it's wrong to mislead people, or because it damages us? in which case I suppose we shouldn't even lie to monsters. You can mull that over. I have no answer for you. Last link in the chain is the taking of this palladium, a not very fancy wooden statue that they thought fell from heaven. He went with Diomedes, Odysseus and Diomedes. What did Diomedes do? Do you remember? Diomedes kind of turned the tables. Yeah, and then did he help Odysseus in? No. Like this is going to be my adventure now. Odysseus, boiling with fury at being outwitted, waited for what seemed an endless time until he heard sounds above, and the rope with the image tied to it came jerkily into reach. In another moment, Diomed landed heavily beside him and drew down the rope. Odysseus turned on his companion, but in an instant Diomed had whirled to let him see the sword in his hand. They say no man gets the better of Odysseus and wins, he stated grimly. I do not know the truth of this saying, but I will first go down the rope. I shall wait for you at the bottom, and while I carry the palladium, you may walk ahead. In the gray light of dawn, Odysseus came back to the camp, while Diomed stalked behind him, the palladium strapped to his back, and the sharp sword ready in his hand. Now, wait a minute. Do you guys remember the chapter where Diomedes and Odysseus went out scouting in the night? Does everybody remember that? Kind of remember? They went out just to spy on the enemy, to see what they were planning to do. And Diomedes, in that story, they asked him, well, who would you like to take with you? Because two is better than one. Oh, there's nobody I would rather choose on a mission like this than Odysseus. Athena loves him, and he's just awesome. And they go out, and if you might remember, there was a newly arrived king, and they kill a bunch of his guys, and they steal his horses, and they find a spy coming from the other side, and they nab him, and they steal his stuff. There was no hint that Diomedes didn't trust Odysseus. Then suddenly Diomedes doesn't trust Odysseus. Do you have any explanation for this? You want to just guesses? I mean, I don't have a right answer, so you can't say the wrong thing. Why the two different stories?
Because he thought that Odysseus wanted to be the one with the victory.
Which was probably true. Well, why didn't he act that way? Why didn't he worry about it when they went on their night raid, though? If he thought Odysseus was the kind who would take all the victory for himself, because he didn't really. When they got back to the camp, they were equally, yay, you two guys are awesome. Can you think of any reason why Diomed would earlier trust him and then not trust him anymore?
Because he's been lying to everyone.
Okay, A, because he's been lying to everyone. Um, do you remember before they went in to get the palladium, Odysseus dressed up like a beggar and snuck in? But he didn't tell anybody he was.
Because maybe he didn't trust them that they actually did go in. It doesn't make sense because then he would think Odysseus go in.
I think the reason we're having trouble is because I don't think there's an answer. The best answer I can think of is to remember these stories. It's not like writing a book where all the plot line of this was all written at one time. This was written over centuries, as far as we can tell. Different stories came, and then somebody would write a play later, and like, oh, I'm going to use these characters and stick something new in. So this all unfolded over centuries. Maybe in some versions, Odysseus is the good guy, and everybody loves him. And maybe in some versions, Odysseus is shifty, and people don't trust him. The only other thing I can think of is that they've been there for almost 10 years. And somebody you trusted early on may turn into somebody you don't trust as much later. Does that make sense? Because things have happened between you and maybe you don't have the trust level anymore. I don't know. It's like, the Star Wars, all the Star Wars movies. They've worked pretty hard to keep everything continuous, which is kind of awesome if you think about it. For 40 years, just for 40 years, they've been making this, but they made these stories for hundreds of years. But over 40 years, they would look back and they would try to make things match up. If something was talked about in episode 4, then they've got to make it continuous. That takes a lot of work. But imagine if those movies had been made over a period of hundreds of years, which I know there haven't been movies that long, but it would be harder to make everything match. Does that make sense? It's just harder to not contradict yourself in the story. And maybe that's the problem. So when you read these stories, when you read Greek mythology, you just kind of have to take it lightly. It's like, okay, in this version, everybody hates Odysseus. And then you read another story. Oh, okay, in this version, Odysseus is the good guy. He's the hero. And you just kind of have to roll with it. Finish the story, finish the book over break. You will finally get to the Trojan horse. Oh, okay. Well, the rest of you will finally get to the Trojan horse you've been waiting for. And then find out what happens to all of these guys when they come home. I want to remind you of something before you read part 6. What did the Greeks have to do before they could get the wind they needed to sail to Troy? Agamemnon. King Agamemnon, high king over all the Greeks, had to kill his own daughter Iphigenia. And after he left, well, if you remember, he lied to his wife and his daughter and said, oh, our daughter's going to marry Achilles. Yes, probably. In this version, we're going to assume she's dead. And his wife went home with no son-in-law Achilles and no daughter anymore. And she's had 10 years to think about it. That dirty, rotten man who's killed my daughter. 10 years to brood on it. So this is not going to be good for Agamemnon when he comes home. Okay, all right. But don't give any more than that. Okay. We have 15 minutes left. So you know what I'm going to do? I don't know how we went through everything so fast. Did you guys have any comments? Because I'm going to read you my poem and then I'm going to read you some terrible English, not to copy. So 3 things over break. Chapter 10, Dorothy Mills, finish the Trojan War, write your paper on the Greeks and their neighbors with simile, alliteration, and an ing opener. Right. I feel like I chose one of these, but I can't remember what it was now. Oh, Zeus. He's important. We should read about Zeus. Okay. Mighty Zeus was king of the gods. Poseidon ruled the sea. Hades ruled the underworld. These were the reigning 3. Zeus controlled the weather with power, good and bad. He'd throw his mighty thunderbolts whenever he got mad. Though mighty Zeus was king of gods, revered all over Greece, his wife, the goddess Hera, would never give him peace. Whenever Zeus was gone too long, his wife would fume and fuss, because back in Greece, the ancient gods had problems just like us. All right, I am going to wonder what will happen if I come and sit on the edge of what will happen with the camera. It will probably be really close up. So you know what? Do you guys care if I just put this between your feet? Awesome. Okay, I hope you guys think these are as funny as I am. I do. And honestly, I hope this inspires you. I mean, we're about to take a fall break and I wanted to do something fun. But, how we write really matters. Grammar matters. Because when you botch it, you say sometimes hilarious things.
Think about it like in Spanish. If you messed up just answer the way you said it, it's going to be a completely different way.
Yes. But this is not quite the same, although we do have words like that. Do you mean like if you pronounce it differently, it turns out? So like dessert and desert? Okay, so let's look at some of these misplaced modifiers. And then if we have time after that, I will read you some of the horrible history tests where kids said crazy things. So a modifier, we'll have grammar lesson and fun at the same time. A modifier is any word that describes a noun. What is the most common, what do we call a word that describes a noun in English grammar? Yes. No, it doesn't describe. An adjective. An adjective is what we call. But, so it's like, oh, I'll just read the funny thing already. No, I keep thinking of things. So any word or group of words that describes a noun is being an adjective. Have you ever thought about the fact that a group of words could be an adjective? For example, the old man used a cane. Okay. So what's the adjective? There's only one in the sentence. Old, old. Old is describing the man. What kind of man? Anytime you can ask the question, what kind, the answer is an adjective. What kind of man? Old man. Old is an adjective. But look at this. The man who was walking with a cane was very old. Now, we have old, but, oh, yes, yes. But look at this. Look at all these words inside here. Who was walking with a cane? See, the whole thing describes the man. Do you see how all those words describe the man? He's what kind of man? Oh, walking with a cane man. Right? And so the fancy grammar term would be this is an adjective, this is a subordinate adjective clause. It's an adjective clause because it's acting like an adjective. Now, just like our ings, it needs to be right next to the thing it's describing. Because look at this. The man was the no, okay, just a second. I gotta do it. Good. Okay. The man was walking with a cane. I just can't write today. Which was very old. Now, this isn't necessarily wrong, but it's only right if it's the cane that's very old. Do you see what I mean? If I want the man to be very old, I'm being very ambiguous. The humor level of what I am about to read to you lies in the fact that the describing words have been removed from the thing they're describing and are now describing something that makes a ludicrous picture. Does that make sense? All right, let me find a few good ones. The baby, no, the jug. See, it's hard to do it wrong. Okay, well, let's look at some people who did it wrong. Yes, sir. Well, the man was walking with me and was very old. Yes, that would be perfectly acceptable. And I would know that it is both the man who's old and walking with a cane. Good repair. Excellent repair. Okay. Okay, some of these might involve people you don't know. I'm looking at the first one and I just think it's really funny, but I don't know if you will because you don't know the people. The parents will think it's funny. These are some out of newspapers. I mean, if you think that grown-ups never do stupid grammar things, you would be so wrong. Yoko Ono will talk about her husband, John Lennon, who was killed in an interview with Barbara Walters. See, the parents laugh. Yoko Ono will talk about her husband, John Lennon, who was killed in an interview with Barbara Walters. It makes it sound like he was killed in the interview, but he was killed, but she's talking about it in the interview. After years of being lost under a pile of dust, Chester D. Thatcher III found all the old records of the Bangor Lions Club at the Bangor House. Well, then Mr. Thatcher was lost under a pile of dust for centuries. Please take time to look over the brochure that is enclosed with your family. Okay, it's not a brochure enclosed with your family. They want you to look at it with your family. We have to say, please take time with your family to look over the enclosed brochure. You're going to like this. Calf born to farmer with 2 heads. That's just wrong. No, the calf has 2 heads. You can't write that.
What's it supposed to be? Yeah, what is it supposed to be?
No, the calf had 2 heads. Calf born to farmer with 2 heads. Calf with 2 heads born to farmer. That's what we have to say. This happens sometimes, you know.
A calf is born with 2 heads?
Yeah, this happens occasionally.
What? I have to see that.
With parental supervision and permission. You can look it up. 2 cars were reported stolen by the Groveton police yesterday.
That's a bad thing.
Do you see? No, the police did not steal the cars. I get to the point where I can't read them. As a baboon who grew up wild in the jungle, I realized that Wiki had special nutritional needs. Okay, now I'm a baboon. He rode his horse across Highway 12 and up and down the sidewalk in front of the saloon a good half hour before deputies arrived, shouting obscenities and being obnoxious, which in this case, the deputies were shouting obscenities and being obnoxious. Locked in a vault for 50 years, the owner of the jewels had decided to sell them. You can't. No, see, it's just, he said what he didn't mean to say. The patient was referred to a psychiatrist with a severe emotional problem. You like that. Now the psychiatrist has a severe. Do not sit in the chair without being fully assembled. No, without the chair being fully assembled. She died in the home in which she was born at the age of 88. You see, now she was born at the age of 88. You have to say she died at the age of 88 in the home in which she was born. A 30-year-old St. Petersburg man was found murdered by his parents in his home late Saturday. It's not what they mean. It's not what they mean. Pele soaked an ankle he injured in an ice bucket. See, now you've injured it in the ice bucket. You can't do that. The judge sentenced the killer to die in the electric chair for the second time. They mean he sentenced him for the second time. Okay, I'll stop with this one and I'll read some of the history ones because you'll appreciate it, especially the gentleman probably. No one was injured in the blast, which was attributed to a buildup of gas by one town official. The town official attributed it to the gas. The gas was not in the official. Yeah, language is very interesting. So maybe I'll bring this book again sometime. We only have 5 minutes, but you might appreciate this too. Because we are reading Greek stories. We're reading portions of which are from the poem The Iliad, and it was written in another language. And anytime you take things from one language and you put it in another language, you have to change something, right? It doesn't really make sense if you just literally translate each word, because languages have their own ways of saying things. And for instance, in English, we say, "What's up?" Do people still say this? Okay. Am I totally dating myself now? And they don't literally mean that you should look up and see what is there. They mean what's going on, what's happening. What are you doing? But if you translated "what's up" literally into another language, it might lead someone to look up above and say, "I don't know what that is." And that's not what you're asking at all. So this is a section of things that have been translated from one language into English, but by people who don't really understand um, what it means in the other language. This is a famous example. When Pepsi Cola invaded the huge Chinese market, the product's slogan, which this used to be Pepsi's slogan, "Come alive with the Pepsi generation," was translated as "Pepsi brings back your dead ancestors." Come alive with the Pepsi generation. So these, my family has found great joy in these for years. These are just mostly in hotels or restaurants where they've translated things into English, and they've tried. They've done their best, you know. In a Japanese hotel room, please to bathe inside the tub. I don't know where else you're going to bathe. In a hotel in Athens, visitors are expected to complain at the office between the hours of 9 and 11 a.m. daily. They mean you can bring complaints, they don't expect you to complain. You are welcome to visit the cemetery where famous Russian and Soviet composers, artists, and writers are buried daily except Thursday. This is another misplaced modifier. They're buried daily. You can visit daily. Oh, well, this one, okay, this is a little, it's not too off color. It's a dry cleaner in Thailand. Drop your trousers here for best results. It's not what they mean. I'm saving the best one for last. In a Swiss mountain inn, special today, no ice cream. I don't even know what that means. Okay, I will let you go with one last one. I memorized this one because it was so awesome. In an Austrian hotel, catering to skiers. So lots of skiers live there. This is some pretty fancy words. I will explain them. Not to perambulate the corridors in the hours of repose in the boots of ascension. In other words, perambulate means walk. Don't walk around in the corridors in the hours of repose. When is that? What is repose? When people are sleeping. In the boots of ascension. What do you think the boots of ascension are? Yes, and what boots do you wear at a ski place when you're going up? Ski boots. Don't walk around in your ski boots at night while people are sleeping. Not to perambulate the corridors in the hours of repose in the boots of ascension. If you have ever bought something, and I'm sure you have, that was made in another country, and you have read the instructions or the instructions how to use it or how to put it together, you will probably run into or have run into these strange translations. So, yes. And so, big shout out to everybody who translates all these old books so that I can read them, so we can read them, and does a good job and doesn't write things like that. So, watch out for your modifiers. And sometime when I think we're going to have extra time, I'll read you the funny history exams that kids wrote crazy things on. Other than that, thank you for your patience. I've been stumbling today and writing couch wrong every time. Have a good week, 2 weeks, and I will see you midway through October. Goodness. Are we not coming next week? We are not coming next week. Next week